Hello, friends, and welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I'm Midge Munster. And Penny, I'm going to start you out today with a little bit of a riddle. I know you
Ooh,
love
I do
love when
love
I do
riddles.
that.
I like riddles.
So, can you tell me, what do Jennifer Aniston, Notre Dame, and marshmallow cereal all have in common?
I'm not sure. Oh, leprechauns. I was
Leprechauns!
definitely thinking of the cathedral, and I was
That's
like,
why
well, one of them is, I'm like, well, two of them are leprechaun related. I don't know. And I was like, oh, the Fighting Irish.
Fighting Irish. That's why I said Notre Dame instead of
Yes.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. I wasn't sure if that was just your Midwestern vibes, Mitch. I
No,
apologize.
no, this French student never.
Yes. Oh,
Uh,
man.
but yeah, with St. Patty's Day coming up, and well, it's kind of between this week's episode and next week's episode, but I wanted to do it before
Hell
St.
yeah.
Patty's Day. So with it coming up this week, I thought we would discuss this character that has made its way from Irish folklore. It's appeared in horror movies, and it's on our cereal boxes alike.
Hell yeah.
uh, yes, the leprechaun. So, Penny, when you think leprechaun, other than the things we just said, obviously, what kind of comes to mind for you visually?
um, so I was I have various leprechaun media of my childhood.
I love that.
We my family used to watch Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Oh my gosh! So we're gonna talk about that. Yes.
Excellent. So
Yeah.
I think of King Brian
Yeah.
from that, and then I also was a big fan of the Disney Channel original movie Luck of the Irish.
Luck of the Irish.
So that's kind of my general sense. I would say a traditional leprechaun. I think of a small, portly little gentleman who has some tricks up his sleeve.
Yes, yes. I love that. I'm so happy because we're going to talk about the fact that uh a lot of like United States American children's first exposure to leprechauns was that movie.
Hmm.
And it's kind of a lot of people's like first toe dip into Irish culture.
Yes.
um so that's cool. Yeah, I actually, this, I'm gonna share a personal anecdote right up front because it my parents listen to the podcast, and I want to
Yes.
shout out my dad, Papa Munster. um my parents have always been holiday people. They made me the crazy person that I am. And so I had a leprechaun, like how the Easter Bunny is a
We
thing.
did that too.
Yeah, my dad created a character named Mr. McGillicuddy. That was my leprechaun. And every St. Pat's, I would like wake up and have a like scavenger hunt of limericks and riddles left by my leprechaun, and I would have to like use the clues and search for a pot of gold.
Ooh,
Um,
that's I like that he had a name. That's very elaborate. We didn't have ours was more, I would say more like the Tooth Fairy.
oh,
Um
okay, yeah.
where you would wake up on St. Patrick's Day and you would have to find something had been dyed green in
Oh,
the house. Like one
cute.
year like the like milk was dyed green and stuff, and then we would get like a little bag of chocolate gold coins.
Cute. Oh, love that. Well, we'll learn a bit today about, what about the
About
sitch
yeah, legit
with
leprechaun lore.
yeah, legit leprechaun lore, and also like the wild Americanization of the
Totally.
leprechaun. um, but as far as traditional Irish leprechauns, they can change quite a bit region to region. Different
Mhm.
regions of Ireland have their own, even like their own specific names for that creature, as well as varying beliefs about what they look like. But as a rule, like Penny said, they're a little guy, um,
Okay.
generally depicted as a solitary creature, which is a standalone kind of thing from he's considered a fae creature,
Mhm.
and most fairies are pretty social, but the leprechaun is not. um he is always male, and Yeah, very small, anywhere from a few inches in height to up to 2 feet, kind of depending on the lore.
Hmm.
Always wearing some kind of fantastical dress, whether that is, you know, the kind of top coat and buckled shoes vibe that we're familiar with. There's also depictions of leprechauns in like full Edwardian, like rough
Ooh.
couture. Um, Also often depicted wearing like a craftsman's apron.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Mm-hmm. But one thing he always has is a little hat. He
Gotta have a little
always
hat.
uh could be a top hat, could be like a stocking cap, could be sometimes it's kind of like a what I can only describe as like a George Washington hat, like the three-pointed
Oh
kind of
yeah.
like military
Like
looking
a
hat.
tricorn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Penny coming in with the chapeau vocab.
Historic hat vocab.
She said I'm something of a milliner myself. But the hat is usually said to have kind of be containing the magic of the leprechaun,
Mhm.
giving him the ability to move very quickly or even to disappear at a moment's notice. Um, and while we often, as Western Americans, picture a leprechaun in green, in a lot of traditional Irish folklore, they are often seen wearing some kind of red item of clothing.
Oh.
There are similar fey creatures throughout folklore that are kind of in their own category of leprechaun. So, in that way of them being dressed in red, there is a critter called the Far Darig, which is literally the red man, who is a little leprechaun type fella in red, but he's got a mean streak. He's kind of angy. um, and there's also the Cluricaun, who specifically guards or steals liquor from cellars. But
Oh.
they're always little fellas, and they're always a little tricky. The other thing, which I was gonna say I don't remember ever learning this, but I don't know that that's true. The leprechaun is supposed to be a shoe cobbler. That's his profession.
Oh,
That
okay.
is what he does. And I was gonna say I don't remember ever learning that, but I do kind of remember, like, in elementary school when you would learn about leprechaun, like, they would talk about if you're building, like, a leprechaun trap, you would put a little shoe under there. Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
I vaguely remember that. I think it's in I think in Luck of the Irish they talk about like his grandpa makes shoes.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, you're so right. Man, I gotta
Yeah.
rewatch.
You
I gotta
got you
rewatch
gotta get
that.
up on Luck of the Irish,
Oh,
Midge, the foremost authority in leprechaun lore.
That was a great movie. That and The 13th Year had a really formative
Yes.
impact on me.
Also, Smart
Um,
House was a big one for
oh
me,
hell
just
yeah.
the Ryan Merriman collection.
Yes. From the Criterion closet. Like
Yes.
um but the belief is kind of because this leprechaun is a solitary fairy that, same that the rest of the fae who are social and stuff spend a lot of their time dancing,
Oh, yeah.
and they needed somebody to repair their shoes, and so the leprechaun is repairing and making dancing slippers for the other fairies. And it's apparently a very lucrative career because this is also how he's making all of his gold.
Oh, makes sense. Yeah,
Because
he's gotta have a job if he's got
he
all this
has a
gold.
he has a proper profession, and
Mhm.
he knows how to save his coin.
Yes.
So to fully understand there's a lot of speculation, I guess. There's no clear, like, here was the starting point where we
Mhm.
decided
Sure.
leprechaun was a thing. But to fully understand the possible origins, we have to go way, 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 way back to Ireland's earliest legends. So the word leprechaun comes from an old Irish word, locorpan, probably mispronouncing that, but meaning small body.
Oh, yeah.
Apt.
Little guy.
Little guy. But they are possibly part of the AC, or the She people,
Mhm.
which are like a supernatural race in Irish mythology that kind of encompass the spirits, the fae, and even fallen gods. So there is a group in Irish mythology, the Tuatha De Danann, who were this race of godlike beings who once ruled over Ireland, the land,
Mhm.
and had big power. But they were eventually defeated in a war by the Milesians, and that is when they retreated underground into the fairy mounds and became like spirits of the land.
Mhm.
And that's the word she, which is spelled
Yeah.
Sidhe. Uh, it's often referring to like a hill or a fairy mound. And these are the fairy mound people. So some believe that the leprechauns and other Irish fairies are the remnants of these ancient, powerful beings that have now been kind of reduced to underground, mischievous trickster spirits.
Mhm.
The earliest written mention of a leprechaun came around the 8th century, which is still
Well, yeah, that's a long time
really
ago.
early, in the story called The Adventure of Fergus MacLeody. And in this story, there's an Irish king named Fergus who falls asleep near the shore and wakes up being dragged into the sea
Whoops.
by 3 tiny leprechaun beings.
Don't you hate when that happens?
I do. I'm just trying to nap, yo.
Right? I don't want to be dragged into the sea right now.
Don't drag me into the sea. But he captures them, and in exchange for their release, they grant him wishes. So this idea of them being able to grant wishes is kind
Mhm.
of how they become associated with the idea of luck. Because if you're able to catch one, you can get whatever you want.
Yeah.
Um, so this gives us an early glimpse into the leprechaun as the small supernatural trickster, but we obviously don't think of leprechauns as like hanging out by the sea. That's
No.
not an I. And there's no mention in this of shoemaking or hidden pots of gold. So how does that start? Well, one theory connects that to the Viking invasions of Ireland in the late 8th and into the 11th century. So Vikings were raiding Ireland, monasteries, villages, taking gold and silver.
Mhm.
And sometimes when they were forced to flee, they would bury the stolen treasure. And so over time, there became this uh, legend of those long forgotten hoards of treasure being guarded by leprechauns,
Mhm.
uh, holding on to the gold. So if you catch the leprechaun, he has to tell you where the gold is hidden. But as many of us who know leprechaun stories, they are known for their trickery.
Mhm.
So if you catch them, too bad.
Good luck.
Good luck,
Your
buddy.
your work is not done.
No, just because you caught them does not mean anything. Most of leprechaun stories, they lead the treasure seeker on some kind of wild goose chase, or they escape and leave them with no riches or wishes.
Oh
Lame.
man. Riches
Uh,
and witches.
I know that's also there's it is the episode title. I don't know why today my speech I'm like there's is
Yeah,
I'm
I was
I
feeling that too. It's a
yeah, hitting the bottle at 11 a.m. on a
Yep.
Sunday.
Well,
Uh, leprechauns. Uh, so the that leads us to the famous idea that a leprechaun's gold is hidden at the end of the rainbow. So of course we know that scientifically a rainbow does not have an
mhm.
actual physical end, which therefore makes this an impossible treasure hunt. And so, in this way, the leprechaun kind of represents this unattainable nature of greed and like fortune always being just out of reach.
Mhm.
So, there's some lore. But, like I mentioned earlier, the early leprechauns were mostly depicted as wearing red. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries, even, that the color green became associated with them. And that was largely due to Ireland's association with the color green in the
Yeah.
wake of
We're just
its
like, "Oh, yeah, that's Irish, must be green."
yeah, well, and it was kind of their signifying color in the wake of their independence movement.
Mhm.
Uh, and as, of course, Irish culture spreads across the world, especially in America due to immigration, the leprechaun becomes a mascot of Irish identity. And then, of course, yeah, makes its way to Lucky Charms boxes across across the states. Uh, so things we talk about a lot on the pod is that, folklore often gets adapted and adopted, but also further complicated by the rise of things like Christianity and
Mhm.
xenophobia. And so is the case with leprechauns. So, if you're not familiar with Irish history, there was a raging famine
Mhm.
that forced all the Irish people, not all of them, but a lot of Irish people, to immigrate to America. And the people were not treated well when they got here. And that was not exclusive to Irish people. America has a history of
Yep.
not treating anybody well when they get here. Um, but Irish people, there was a very specific time where there was a lot of anti-Irish
Mhm.
sentiment. This partially was because of religious tension that was already happening long before the Irish people got there, but there was a conflict, of course, between Catholics and Protestants. And when you bring an influx of immigrants, I think I read something that said Boston got something to the tune of like 37,000 Irish immigrants in less than a year.
Wow.
And it was only like Boston at the time only had like 100,000 people to
Yeah.
begin with. So it was like this mass influx of immigrants. And a lot of people, these Anglo-Saxon Protestant people who are in America already, uh, either the oldest of that generation like remembered, or their most recent ancestors had specifically like fled Catholicism
Yeah.
and sought refuge from that, and so they felt threatened by this onslaught of very staunch Catholic Irish immigrants. And what do people do when they feel threatened? Create a villain.
Meh.
So began the stereotypes of Irish people as being kind of lazy, drunkards. Irish people were getting forced into a lot of hard labor and were kind of being seen as less than because they were doing a lot of the menial
Mhm.
jobs. And as Irish anti sentiment rose, leprechaun lore changed as well. There was a period where they were kind of shown as child stealers,
Ooh.
swapping human babies with changelings, which are like half fairy children. And they also were depicted as murderers, killing people who came to look for their pot of gold. Not cute.
No.
But in other ways, they also aided in the view of Irish people. As Penny mentioned, the oh my god, my brain. Not the word for something that is not a film, a book. oh
Yes.
my,
Books.
oh my god. You know, those things. So, like I mentioned earlier, Darby O'Gill was kind of one of the first um, toes into deeper Irish culture that a lot of Americans had
Mhm.
experienced. The book Darby O'Gill was published in 1903 in the States.
Oh, wow.
It is largely out of publication now. You like cannot find it because, as Penny mentioned, it became a film by Disney in
Hey.
1959. And so Disney later like quote re-released the book, but basically as a novelization
Yeah.
of the film. But the 1903 book was written by a woman and was written by an Irish woman specifically, but published in the States. And so a lot of people got introduced to all kinds of not just leprechauns. There is a storyline about like a leprechaun
Mhm.
king and them trying to kind of barter with him, but there's also like banshee and
Yeah.
fairies, like all kinds of Irish folklore in this story. But the leprechaun has a really strong presence in that story. And through that, he kind of becomes this like endearing, unthreatening avatar for Irish people.
Yeah.
People are like, ah, cute, and a leprechaun,
Yeah, a little guy.
a little guy. He's so small. Um, and as Irish pride parades and culture festivals and events become more quote inclusive, aka like they have to adapt to uh be seen, I
Yeah.
guess, be integrated into American culture. And so they kind of, it becomes a St. Patrick's Day celebration, it becomes more open to
Mhm.
people that are not just the Irish Americans. And the leprechaun really becomes the symbol for that everyone kind of unites under. And we do love our leprechauns in the United States. Like we've mentioned already, like most children do here in the US like learn about them around
Mhm.
St. Patrick's Day in elementary school, and usually do some kind of like craft or build leprechaun traps or
Yep.
do something or other. But what's very funny about that, so I reached out to my friend Sean, who is Irish, like actually, not
Yeah.
not in the way that Americans are like, I'm Irish.
Yes.
He is from Ireland, grew up in Ireland, lived there into his adulthood, and only recently, like now lives in the United States. And so I reached out to Sean. I was like, hey, I'm doing an episode on my podcast about like leprechaun lore. And I'm finding out that like lots of different regions of Ireland view them differently, blah de blah. Like can you tell me, if anything, like what you remember learning
Mhm.
about them growing up? And he was like, yeah, honestly, we don't really talk about leprechauns that much. He was like, we learned a lot about like banshee and
Mhm.
like other critters, but he's like, they're just kind of one of, like, leprechauns are just like also there, like they're one of
Yeah.
many many things in folklore, but we don't like spend time talking about leprechauns, which is wild because in the
Americans love leprechauns.
we love them. We love a little guy. So much so that they've really made their way into pop culture.
Mhm.
Um, so I would be remiss if we don't talk about the 1993 Leprechaun film franchise entering the
Yes.
chat, because this is a specific crossover where folklore becomes horror. Um, and these movies are positively wild. It's this sparks an 8 film horror
Oh my
franchise,
god.
which a lot of people don't realize that there are 8 Leprechaun films, but there surely are.
Gosh. I
Um,
wonder why. I can't imagine that each of them isn't just as good as the last.
well, and we do go in classic, like we've gone too far horror franchise fashion. Leprechaun does go to space.
Oh my god.
Um, but yeah, this franchise graces us with both Jen Aniston's first
Mhm.
major film appearance in the first movie. But yeah, also some of the most bizarre cinematic experiences I've ever had, and probably a lot of you as well. I feel like to this day, one of my most clear memories of walking down the Blockbuster aisles as a kid is seeing the Leprechaun Back to the Hood
Oh, yeah.
cover of the leprechaun wearing like he's wearing like a chain.
Yes, I do remember this.
Yeah, leprechaun. Well, see, is it Leprechaun 6 is into Hood, and then Leprechaun 7, I believe, is back to the Hood. So
They're like,
those
we're still into
were
Hood."
still honestly some of the best films in that franchise. They're wild. Um, and those films are just chock a block full of Warwick Davis
Oh,
is the
yes.
Leprechaun, and I adore him. He
He's
just
great.
what, like 2 weeks ago, won uh the BAFTA Lifetime Achievement Award.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
He's
Oh,
great.
it was very moving. He gave a speech about his late wife and like
Mhm.
how she encouraged him to like go for some of these like maybe less than perfect roles so that
Yeah.
he could like be seen. And
Yeah, make a name and it
yeah,
worked.
very,
Yeah.
he's a cool fella, very cool. um in more recent years, there have been supposed leprechaun sightings in the United States.
Yes.
Specifically in 2006, there is a very like famous and bizarre case in Mobile, Alabama that went viral. If things went viral in 2006, this was like as viral as you could be at that time. But there were news reports that a leprechaun had been spotted in a tree. And I don't know, do you remember this at all? I remember this so
This sounds
vividly.
vaguely familiar.
Like huge crowds came from like everywhere to look at the
Oh,
leprechaun.
I do remember this.
Like there were reporters, there was like police presence, like it was absolutely crazy. And you can still find the original like news story on YouTube. First of all, hilarious because there's like an amateur sketch artist that drew what the leprechaun looks like, which did become like a meme later on. Um, but also just people are so serious about it. Like they said that it would only appear at night, and if you shined a light at it, it would disappear. Um, and so there's just all this hilarious footage of them interviewing locals. And my favorite, there's, they're like, oh, what do you think it could be? And there's people who are very adamant that's a leprechaun. And then of course there's the pennies that are like, it's a shadow, it's an animal.
Wild takes, like it's a shadow.
But then there's this woman, I love her so much, with her full chest. She's like, I think it's a crackhead who got a hold of the wrong stuff.
All right.
She's like, it told him to, I'm a leprechaun, get up in that tree.
Where there is there any mythology about leprechauns being in trees? Because
I don't think
I vaguely
so.
remember people. I remember this, and my first thought was, I was like, why would it be in a tree?
Right. And that, like, all the people are like, oh, the pot of gold is under the tree, we're gonna dig up the tree. Like, people were and it's also very funny because of course it's like a large Black population, and that's just usually like such white nonsense to be like. So seeing all of these like large Black men so excited about a leprechaun is so endearing and funny. I just love it. But yeah, please go watch that clip. It's so freaking funny. At any rate, leprechauns have remained a big star of the St. Pat's world here in the US. But some parts of Ireland did get on board. In 2009, a law was passed in Carlingford, Ireland, declaring leprechauns a protected species.
Cute.
Of course, this is mostly a tourism gig, but there is a local legend to that area that claims that a pub proprietor whose name was PJ O'Hare was walking through a plot of land and heard like a little stifled scream, and came up on this well and found the skeletal remains of a leprechaun and his like tiny leprechaun clothes. And supposedly the skeleton just like dissipated into dust very quickly.
How did he hear a scream and then it was already a skeleton?
Because I guess it got I don't know.
I don't know about this, PJ.
Right. Well, I'm like, how late were you at the pub, PJ?
Truly.
But he supposedly was still able to have the tiny clothes, and so he put them on display in his pub in Carlingford, and people would come take a look at the leprechaun clothes. So to this day in Carlingford, every year there is a leprechaun hunt where people come from all over and search for gold coins. And which I'm like, well, which is it? Are they a protected species, or are we hunting them?
Or can we hunt them?
I think we're hunting for their gold, not for them specifically.
All right, that's fair.
Well, that is a little look into the history of leprechauns, how they came here, why they're such a big deal to us. They are just fun little guys, but of course, if you go looking for one this week, be careful. May the luck of the Irish be on your side. If you are going to go on a leprechaun hunt yourself and you are looking to put together a gaggle of people to hunt leprechauns with, we have a place for you to do that. We have started a Discord, and it is really, really fun over there. That'll be linked in the episode description if you want to check that out and come hang out with us over there. It's been a really good time. If you would like to leave our podcast a review, you can do that on Apple Podcasts. You can submit that to us in an Instagram direct message if you like, or you can also now leave comments on Spotify. And I think Penny has a Spotify comment to share with us.
I sure do. This comes from Tori, who says, "Y'all are the best. I plan for folding my laundry on Tuesdays so I can hang with you ghouls and learn some spooky new fun things. Thanks for being so awesome." Thank you, Tori.
ADHDers unite to use
Yes,
the
you gotta.
podcast to do your chores.
Yes, you need a task. You got to have a podcast to go with it.
Body doubling, yeah. Thank you, Tori, for leaving that on Spotify. You can leave those there, or if you'd like to, like I said, check us out on Instagram. You can always follow us there at Ghouls Night In Pod. And if you are looking for me, you can find me all over the web at Midge Munster.
And you can find me at Penny Snark.
And until next time,
Goodbye.
bye.